Sandwalker recruits mocked her for interrupting, then fell silent when the alien general froze. They mocked her for raising her hand. A mere human cadet, surrounded by genetically engineered tacticians, centuries-old warriors, and species bred for war. What right did she have to speak? In the elite halls of the Sandwalker Academy, silence was respect, and questioning a general was a silent invitation to be destroyed. But Alya Norwood wasn't trying to challenge anyone. She just wanted to understand. Yet when she opened her mouth, the most feared alien general in the galaxy didn't laugh. He froze. And that silence, it changed everything. Because what she said pierced through arrogance, doctrine, and fear. What started as a question became a movement, and her voice, once ignored, would echo across systems. This is the story of how one moment, one voice, and one defiant silence cracked the foundation of galactic warfare. And it all began with a raised hand. If you're ready for a cinematic sci-fi tale that blends strategy, rebellion, and the power of a single question like Comet, and subscribe to support more stories like this one. The chamber of Lecture Hall 7 shimmered with the low hum of artificial gravity stabilizers, barely masking the tension that pulsed through the rows of cadets. Dozens of species filled the amphitheater, taloned, scaled, furred, and skinned, each bearing the insignia of the Sandwalker Alliance, the elite academy of war. Among them sat Alya Norwood, spine straight, hands folded, trying not to appear smaller than she already was. Her uniform bore no rank, no stripes, just the cold blue of human recruits. The towering figure at the front cast a shadow that stretched over half the room. General Zarnthal, the living legend of the Vreeteran warfront, had entered, and with him came silence, reverence, and unspoken fear. Zarnthal didn't waste time. War, he began, his voice vibrating in layered harmonics, is not chaos, it is precision. His glowing amber eyes scanned the audience, lingering briefly on the humans. And precision, he continued, is what your species lacks. A low murmur rippled through the Brithik and Talvin cadets. Mocking chuckles, subtle enough to evade discipline, loud enough to sting. Alya clenched her jaw, but said nothing. The general activated a holographic array, revealing ancient battles fought across galaxies, each annotated with strategic failures and victories. The lecture had begun, and the weight of expectation pressed hard on every spine. As he spoke, he walked, a slow, deliberate circle around the amphitheater, each step echoing like a drumbeat of certainty. If you hesitate in combat, he said, you die. If your logic fails you, your battalion dies. If your pride blinds you, your planet burns. His eyes flared slightly. This has happened. I have seen it. I have caused it. Alya found herself watching more than listening. There was something in the diagrams that didn't align with what she'd studied. A misalignment in flank trajectories. A redundancy in ship positioning. She frowned but remained silent. After all, who would dare interrupt the alien general mid-sentence? The cadets around her began to settle into two groups. Those engrossed by Zarnthal's doctrine, and those taking the opportunity to measure humans with side glances and smirks. One Talvin whispered, let's see if the apelings can keep up. Alya ignored it, but her thoughts churned. She wasn't trying to be disruptive. She was trying to understand. Something in the general's tactical model contradicted core Sandwalker manuals. Was it a teaching flaw, or an intentional trap to test perception? She stared at the screen, her heart rate rising. The moment felt heavier than it should. Now, examine the scenario, Zarnthal announced, freezing the holomap at a key point. Where should the fourth Talvin flank have repositioned during the cross ambush? Hands shot up instantly, clawed, scaled, glowing. Alya stayed down. She wasn't here to impress. Not yet. The general selected a Brithik, who confidently proposed a flank reversal and central pressure burst. Zarnthal tilted his head. Incorrect. That would have collapsed the right wing. You traded 40 for 400. A silence followed. The Brithik's crest dimmed in shame. Alya's heart thudded again. She knew the answer. Or, at least, she knew a better question. Every muscle in her body wanted to stay still. But her hand, traitorous, stubborn, rose. Not high, just enough to be seen. Her stomach clenched. Her eyes stayed forward. She didn't look at the alien cadets around her, nor the human recruits who stiffened. It was a simple gesture, but in that room, it carried the weight of rebellion. For a long second, nothing happened. Then came the laughter, soft at first, like air slipping through vents. Then louder, pointed, infectious. "She thinks it's school," someone hissed. "Maybe she wants to ask about math," said another. Alya lowered her hand halfway, but stopped. Zarnthal had paused mid-sentence. His head turned. Slowly, the laughter died. One of his arms clicked behind his back. The other gestured toward her. "Cadet, human," he said, not with disdain, but with dangerous curiosity. "You have something to say?" The room was a vacuum. Alya swallowed. She hadn't planned for this. She only wanted clarification. But now, Everett was on her. She thought of staying silent, thought of backing down. But something inside rebelled against the silence she'd endured since arriving. "Yes, General," she said, voice steady but low. "I believe the flank shouldn't have been deployed at all." Gasps. Audible, clear. Zarnthal blinked slowly. No eyelids, just a shift of membrane. "Explain." Alya stood. Her voice trembled but grew with each word. The enemy wasn't flanking. They were hurting. The Talvin didn't need to reposition. They needed to retreat and bait. A second wave of shock filled the hall. Not because she was wrong, because she wasn't. She had just suggested the exact maneuver that contradicted one of the Vritarun's foundational doctrines. And yet, there was a rhythm to her logic that couldn't be ignored. Zarnthal stared. His eyes dimmed. His body froze. Not from rage, but from realization. Silence consumed the room. Alya's breath caught. Was she about to be expelled? Punished? Publicly humiliated? But the general said nothing. No correction. No snarl. Just nothing. His gaze locked onto hers, unblinking. She felt the weight of the moment collapse into stillness. The cadets, once noisy, were now mute. Somewhere behind her, someone dropped a stylus. No one moved. No one dared. Alya stood as if at trial, unsure whether she had sentenced herself, or revealed something they all refused to see. The silence didn't break. It shattered. General Zarnthal slowly turned back to the hologram, his clawed finger hovering above projection like he was seeing it for the first time. "Hurting," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Not flanking." Alya remained standing, her palms damp and heart pounding, unsure if what followed would be praise or punishment. No one laughed now. The Talvin who mocked her earlier shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Then came the unexpected. The general deactivated the entire simulation. The glowing battlefields disappeared into static. "We are done for today," he announced. "Dismissed." Murmurs erupted instantly. Alya blinked. Was that it? The most feared lecturer in Sandwalker history had ended the session. Because of her? The cadets hesitated, unsure whether this was some kind of trap. Slowly, they rose. Some stared at her like she was a bomb with a ticking timer. Others looked away, as if fearing eye contact might make them targets too. Alya gathered her things, clutching her datapad like a shield. She moved toward the exit, but stopped when she noticed the general hadn't moved. He was still watching her, face unreadable, golden eyes unblinking. 1,000 possibilities flashed in her mind. Before she could reach the door, a mechanical voice echoed overhead. "Cadet Alya Norwood, remain in place. The general requests your presence." The crowd froze again. Alya's legs stiffened. She hadn't imagined it. Every instinct told her to run, to disappear into the sea of species fleeing the room. But she stayed. The room cleared in awkward clusters. Talvins whispered. Brithix stared. The other humans looked at her like she'd gone insane. Alone now, she faced the general. He descended the platform slowly, each step deliberate. "Do you know why I stopped the lecture?" he asked, voice low but thunderous in tone. "No, General," she said, barely louder than a whisper. "Because you were correct," he said. "And worse, your logic destabilized my own." Alya's mind reeled. Was that even a compliment? The general moved past her and activated a new hologram, classified tactical layers that no cadet had access to. "Come," he said, gesturing her forward. She hesitated. then stepped into the circle. "This is the real cross scenario," he said. "Unedited. What you suggested, herding, baiting, withdrawal, it would have saved thousands of Talvin lives. No cadet ever questioned it. No officer challenged the doctrine. Until now." Her breath caught again. "You are human," Zarnthal said, "and yet you do not think like the rest of your species." Alya wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or insulted. He circled her like a strategist circling a mystery. "You saw what we could not. That is rare. Dangerous, but rare." Then, to her shock, he opened a direct line to the Rada Galaktyczna's War Council terminal. "I will submit a formal revision to Doctrine 47T. Your analysis will be attached. You will be credited as contributor." Alya felt her knees weaken. A nobody, a recruit. Suddenly, her name would echo across star charts she had never seen. "Why me?" she asked. "Why now?" Zarnthal's response was simple. "Because you asked a question no one else dared to ask." He turned to leave, but paused. "Tomorrow, there's a closed-door simulation for upper-rank cadets. You will join." That was not a suggestion. It was a command. Alya's world tilted. This wasn't a recognition. It was a transformation, and she wasn't sure she was ready. The moment felt surreal, like waking into someone else's future. She stared at the now-dark terminal, the implications sinking in. One question. That's all it took to fracture a century-old doctrine. As she walked alone back to her dormitory wing, shadows seemed to stretch differently around her. Cadets parted ways. Some nodded. Others turned their backs. The humans looked at her with awe, confusion, maybe envy. She passed a Talvin who muttered, "Traitor," under his breath. Another whispered, "Chosen." Alya realized she had entered a territory more dangerous than battlefield. Politics. Her rise wasn't clean. And not everyone wanted a human rewriting galactic war theory. She reached her room, locked the door, and stared at her reflection. Who was she now? A hero? A threat? Or simply seen? That night, sleep refused to come. Her mind replayed every word, every glance, every moment. She thought about her family back on Earth, still unaware that their daughter had challenged one of the galaxy's greatest minds. She thought about what tomorrow would bring, praise, maybe, but also scrutiny, isolation, and pressure. She closed her eyes, whispering the same phrase over and over, "Don't be afraid to ask." That had been her father's saying. Simple, brave, foolish. Now, it echoed to the halls of the most powerful academy in the galaxy. Alya Norwood had raised her hand, and nothing would ever be the same. The next day dawned with an unnatural quiet across the academy. Word had spread. Whispers became rumors, and rumors became doctrine. Alya Norwood, the human cadet, was to join the closed simulation reserved for the top tier of Sandwalker elites. Some said she had hacked the council. Others whispered she was being used as a political pawn by the Vritaran. Alya ignored them. Her thoughts were heavier than pride. This wasn't about recognition. It was about not making a mistake under the spotlight of giants. As she approached the simulation chamber, a Brithic officer eyed her. "You are either brave," he muttered, "or suicidal." Inside, the chamber was colder than expected, both in temperature and atmosphere. Cadets stood in small clusters, whispering in dialects Alya couldn't follow. General Zarnthal stood at the center, arms folded, eyes dimmed. He didn't acknowledge her presence immediately. Instead, he addressed the group. "Today, we retest a scenario previously deemed resolved. It has been altered." A map appeared above them. She recognized it instantly. The cross ambush. But this time, it was built on her revision. Zarnthal turned toward her and said, "Cadet Norwood will co-command the defense." A Talvin cadet hissed under his breath, "This is mockery." No one volunteered to join Alya's unit. She stood alone before the battle table, watching as others divided into pairs and clusters. Zarnthal didn't interfere. It was part of the test. Alone, she analyzed. No banter. No backup. Just her logic. The countdown began. 10 minutes to plan, 2 to act. She adjusted the formations, reprogrammed the pulse beacons, remapped retreat corridors. The general observed, silent, arms locked behind his back. When the simulation launched, she breathed slowly. The enemy surged with precision, exploiting overconfidence. Her tactics kicked in. Diversion flares, false supply trails, collapsed triggers. Within minutes, her zone was the only one standing. The silence after the sim ended was thicker than before. Alya's command unit had 0 casualties. 2 others had collapsed in under 4 minutes. The remaining group lost half their assets. She turned away from the board, ready for the backlash, but no one laughed this time. Zarnthal stepped forward and faced her. I have seen brilliance, but rarely uncorrupted by arrogance. He activated a data crystal, encrypted it, and handed it to her. This will be submitted to the Rada Galaktyczna archives, under your name. For the first time, Alya noticed a shift in his stance. Not power, but respect. One of the cadets, a Loxery, stepped forward. She got lucky, he sneered. There was no real enemy. Alya turned. Strategy doesn't rely on real bullets to be valid, she replied. The Loxery's tentacles twitched. He wanted to argue, but stopped. The general intervened. Luck, he said, favors a prepared mind. And she was the only one who rewrote the scenario. Another twist. A few cadets now approached her, not to mock, but to learn. A Brithik asked for her notes. A Talvin offered to study together. The shift was visible, though fragile, from mockery to curiosity, and in some fear. Zarnthal closed the session. Return tomorrow. We will test a different doctrine, one you have all taken for granted. Eyes turned to Alya again. Would she challenge that too? She wasn't sure. The responsibility was growing fast. But the general didn't just stop there. Cadet Norwood remained. The others left in silence, the air thick with anticipation. When they were gone, he turned back to her and said, You must choose. You can continue as cadet, or I will recommend you for early mentorship under council tactical oversight. Alya froze. It was more than a promotion. It was isolation, visibility, risk. She asked, Why me again? His response was colder this time. Because the others did not see. Because they parroted. You questioned. That wasn't praise. That was burden. The general continued. You will lose comrades. You will be questioned. Your loyalty will be tested. And you will be alone. Alya hesitated. Part of her wanted to go back to yesterday, to be just another recruit, unnoticed. But part of her burned to keep going. She nodded once. Then I accept. The general's eyes shimmered faintly. Then prepare. Because now, you're no longer protected by anonymity. Later that evening, Alya walked through the academy corridors, her footsteps echoing louder than usual. Her datapad buzzed with messages from strangers, some congratulating her, others warning her. A few were anonymous threats. Know your place, Terran. We don't rewrite centuries because of one ape. She deleted them, but their shadows stayed. Her hands trembled as she touched the data crystal the general had given her. This wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about survival, legacy, and truth. She looked out at the distant stars and whispered, I asked a question and now I carry the answer. The following day began not with orders, but with silence. Alya's dorm door slid open to reveal not an instructor, but an escort unit. 2 Veteran honor guards clad in obsidian armor. You are to report to the strategic dome. One said without emotion. Cadets along the corridors stepped aside, whispering. Some glared. Others simply watched. Her path was no longer invisible. Every step felt heavier, not out of fear, but from the weight of expectations she never asked for. As she entered the dome, the simulation floor had been replaced by a round table of tactical chairs, 8 alien officers, and one was empty. General Zarnthal gestured for her to sit. You are not here to speak, he said. You are here to listen, to learn. That was a relief, if temporary. The officers debated new combat doctrines. Terms she didn't recognize flowed like rivers of math and memory. But when they reached a sticking point, something unexpected happened. Zarnthal turned to her. Cadet Norwood, thoughts? The room froze. Again, Alya hesitated, then offered a different angle, one focused on deceptive retreat. Murmurs erupted. One officer barked, "She's not authorized to contribute." But Zarnthal silenced him with a single raised claw. "She is not authorized," the general said calmly, "because no one authorized vision. It must appear on its own." Alya's response was measured, thoughtful, but it struck deep. The council debated for 15 minutes. Then, reluctantly, they integrated her suggestion into the scenario. She didn't feel triumphant, only out of place. That night, her name appeared on the closed memo dispatch from the Rada Galaktyczna. Strategic observation granted Norwood, human cadet. For the first time in history, a human was officially listed as an auxiliary to a senior tactical cell. And just like that, her face was no longer anonymous. But respect, she learned, came with a price. The next day, 2 of her fellow human cadets stopped speaking to her. They viewed her not as a hero, but a traitor. "You think you're above us now," one said bitterly. "You know they'll use you and drop you." Alya didn't argue. She understood, in breaking the ceiling. She'd also severed the floor beneath her. Meanwhile, alien cadets watched her with a mix of calculation and suspicion. Some respected her mind. Others saw her rise as a threat to the status quo. She wasn't just disrupting protocol. She was rewriting hierarchy. Then came the visit. A Brithic elder, retired but revered, approached her in the training yard. His voice rasped like stone scraping steel. "You speak like those who survived, not those who commanded." Alya blinked. "What does that mean?" The elder tapped her chest. "You ask questions not to conquer, but to prevent loss. That is why they fear you." The words haunted her. Was her mind a weapon or a warning? Later that day, her access was expanded. She was granted permission to observe simulations in real time, not as participant, but as reviewer. Some officers protested, but the Rada didn't back down. In the observation deck, Alya watched doctrines unfold like chess matches. She spotted errors, inconsistencies, and blind spots the AI systems couldn't detect. Quietly, her notes began reshaping training sequences. Her influence grew in whispers, not proclamations, but she remained isolated. Even those who respected her rarely spoke to her outside formal settings. One evening, she overheard 2 Talvin cadets debating her fate. Either she joins Rada fully, one said, or she vanishes in a convenient accident. The line chilled her blood. For the first time, she realized her ideas didn't just challenge tradition, they threatened power. That night, she received an encrypted message from an anonymous sender. No greeting, no signature, just one line: "Decline the next invitation." She stared at the message for hours. What invitation? From whom? And what would happen if she didn't? The following morning, the answer arrived. General Zarnthal summoned her privately. "There is an open position for junior tactical mentor. You will be nominated, but it will mark you permanently." Alya understood. This wasn't a step forward. It was a line in the sand. Accepting meant she could never return to being just a cadet. Refusing might preserve her safety, but erase her progress. She hesitated only a moment. "I accept," she said. The general nodded. "Then, from this moment, you are no longer protected by ignorance. Every move you make is now history, or a warning." Alya walked out of the chamber and into a world that had already begun to change. She was no longer the silent girl with questions. She was the anomaly, the fracture in the system, the unforeseen variable. And across the academy, both allies and enemies prepared themselves, not for who she had been, but for who she might become. 3 days after her acceptance, the battle table test was announced. A tradition older than most species at Sandwalker, it was a simulation designed to replicate the fog of war, dozens of simultaneous threats, false intelligence, unpredictable allies, and shifting terrain. Few passed. None did so without scars. Alya stood in the center of the chamber as dozens of cadets gathered in a circular gallery above, watching. She wasn't competing against a computer. She was being watched by the Rada itself. Initiating zero-fail simulation, the AI announced. Her hands hovered above the control interface, trembling for the first time since this began. The scenario unfolded. A fractured alliance, pirate ambushes, broken communication relays. and betrayal from within. Alya had 30 seconds to choose a core directive: defend, retreat, or pursue. Her instincts screamed to defend, but something deeper whispered, bait. She selected pursue while fragmenting signals, a choice that left her flanks exposed. As expected, the AI launched a double-fronted attack, but her rear battalion, hidden under jamming signals, sprung a counter-ambush that disrupted the enemy rhythm. It wasn't flawless. She lost a third of her forces, but she held. Then came the twist. A rogue human fleet entered the map, an unexpected wild card. The room buzzed. Cadets whispered. Some laughed. Was the AI mocking her humanity? Alya didn't blink. She opened a communication channel to the rogue fleet and offered them fuel and data in exchange for a temporary alliance. The fleet accepted. Her classmates looked stunned. That's against protocol, one Brithik hissed. But the general remained silent, watching. The alliance turned the tide. Her units advanced. The map began to shift. Still, the pressure rose. Saboteurs emerged. Friendly fire incidents increased. The simulation adapted, seeking to corner her into collapse. Alya leaned in, narrowing her strategy to prioritize deception and rapid pivots. Her final play was risky. Fake a surrender signal from her command vessel, drawing the AI's forces into a trap, while her true control point shifted planetside. As the AI's units swarmed the false signal, Alya's forces ambushed their rear, severing their power grid and capturing their command. Victory achieved, the simulation declared. But there was no cheer, only silence, until the general stood and spoke. You defeated an unbeatable scenario, and you did it by breaking rules, without breaking ethics. Alya's breath shook. She had done more than pass. She had reshaped how war could be approached at Sandwalker, but not all were impressed. One senior cadet stood. That wasn't strategy. That was opportunism. Alya met his eyes. Strategy is using opportunity before it turns into regret. Laughter echoed in the gallery, not mocking, but impressed. Still, she felt no relief. As the simulation room emptied, Zarnthal motioned her over. The fleet you allied with, he said, was based on a real incident. 20 years ago, I refused to negotiate with them. I lost half my division. Your choice corrected my failure. The revelation stunned her. She hadn't just beaten a test. She had rewritten a shameful moment from a general's past. Alya didn't know what to say. Why include that in a simulation? The general's voice lowered. Because I wanted to see if anyone else saw what I hadn't. And only you did. He handed her a new data crystal, encoded with permissions she'd never seen. You're now authorized to access pre-classified war archives. Her status shifted again, no longer just mentee but unofficial analyst. This time, it wasn't the Academy watching. It was the Council. She felt her chest tighten. With every victory came another weight. Another door opened, but fewer places left to turn back. As she walked back through the halls, whispers gave way to nods. Not many, but enough. Cadets began to acknowledge her not just for her anomaly, but for her consistency. Brithiks who once mocked her now requested tactical reviews. Even the Talvin kept their distance. But that didn't erase the danger. That night, her door was hacked. Not breached, but pinged by someone with internal access. A warning. Alya stared at the console, unsure if it was a threat or a test. She changed her access protocols, then locked her room manually. Fear crept back in, but didn't control her. She was still standing. In her dreams, she saw the rogue fleet again, but this time it bore her name. In the nightmare, it turned against her. She woke before the first shot, panting. She sat upright, eyes scanning the room. The simulation had ended, but the war for her place in the system had just begun. Every test pass pulled her deeper into a game where visibility meant vulnerability. But Alya wasn't the same girl who once raised her hand. She now knew the rules and how to bend them without breaking. What terrified her most was the realization that maybe, just maybe, she wanted to. The aftermath of the battle table test didn't fade. It rippled. Within hours, footage of the simulation was restricted under council order. Still, Whispers flew like plasma bolts. The cadet who baited a phantom fleet, reprogrammed surrender protocols, and reversed a doctrine had done so in front of the entire academy. Alya didn't ask for recognition, but it found her. Her datapad buzzed with cryptic messages. "Rewrite the future," one said. Another warned. "You're becoming the threat they warned us about." That one stung. She had started by raising her hand. Now she was being spoken of like a weapon, not a person. The Rada Galaktyczna held an emergency tactical session. Alya wasn't invited, but her simulation logs were dissected frame by frame. Strategic advisors debated whether to update interspecies Doctrine 12C, one untouched since the Second Tau Uprising. Eventually, they voted narrowly to allow revisions based on Alya's choices. It was the first human-led strategic amendment in Rada history. That same day, a senior Brithic colonel resigned, citing doctrinal dishonor. Others called her approach unorthodox, even dangerous. But the motion passed. Her name now existed not just in simulations, but in textbooks. Yet she didn't celebrate. She felt the eyes, the quiet envy, the building resistance. General Zarnthal summoned her again, but this time his tone had shifted. "You've broken the silence," he said. "Now you must survive the echo." He handed her a black badge with no insignia. "This gives you access to the labyrinth, the Council's hidden archive." Alya stared at it, unsure whether it was a gift or a trap. He offered no clarity, just said, "In there, you'll find the past mistakes we buried. Maybe your questions will find new ones." That night, she descended alone into the labyrinth. Biometric locks, sealed doors, echoes of decisions that had cost billions of lives. Inside, holograms whispered. Doctrines buried after mass failures. Lies rewritten as victories. Alya felt the room closing in, but she didn't flinch. She studied them. She asked what no one else dared. What if these truths had been seen earlier? Hours passed. One file caught her eye, Operation Ash Window, a classified mission buried by Zarnthal's own species. Tactical collapse, suppressed by fabricated footage. It mirrored a flaw she had just corrected in the simulation. Coincidence? Or a deliberate cover? She downloaded it. If the Council had based laws on illusions, what else had they ignored? Her questions deepened. So did the danger. Returning from the labyrinth, she found a new message on her personal terminal. This one wasn't encrypted. It was a public summons. Cadet Norwood to appear before the Tricultural Tribunal for review of influence. She froze. It wasn't a trial, but it wasn't benign either. The tribunal evaluated individuals who disrupted military-political equilibrium. The message ended with a phrase rarely used in cadet records, emerging variable of doctrinal concern. She was now officially a threat, acknowledged not just by whispers, but by the system itself. The next morning, she prepared, uniform polished, speech memorized, heart unsteady but resolute. The tribunal chamber dwarfed her. 3 alien species sat in judgment, Vritaran, Talvin, and Brithic. Cadet Norwood, the Vritaran delegate began, "Your insight is significant, but dangerous. Are you aware of the instability your ideas could cause?" She answered plainly, "Only if truth is considered unstable." Murmurs. The Talvin delegate leaned forward. "Do you deny seeking personal elevation through disruption?" She shook her head. "I sought clarity." Others gave it weight. A pause. Then the Brithic asked, "If granted limited authority, would you temper your analysis?" Alya looked at them all and said, "I will temper my tone, not my mind." The room quieted. Then Zarnthal entered, unannounced. He stood beside her. "Her voice may be sharp," he said, "but it is the only one that has pierced our arrogance in decades." That moment shifted the room. The tribunal deliberated. After 20 silent minutes, they returned. Cadet Norwood is granted provisional strategic status. She will not be silenced, but she will be watched. Alya bowed slightly. She didn't win. She didn't lose. She walked the line between tolerated and targeted. Still, the Council had spoken. Her name wouldn't be erased. And with it, neither would the truths she had uncovered. Back in her dorm, She placed the tribunal's decision crystal beside her old datapad. One symbolized regulation, the other revolution. She didn't know what came next, only that it would be harder, lonelier, and more scrutinized than ever. Yet for the first time, she felt steady. She wasn't climbing anymore. She was holding ground. And maybe that was braver, because now she knew the truth, not just about war or doctrine, but about herself. She wasn't an exception to the system. She was the system's mirror. And every time she raised her voice, they would have to choose whether to look away or finally listen. Alya's promotion to provisional strategic status didn't come with applause. It came with surveillance. Her quarters were relocated, closer to the upper command ring, farther from the other cadets. Every communication was monitored, every movement logged. Even her meals were delivered silently, without eye contact. Freedom had never felt so narrow, yet she understood. The academy didn't reward deviation. It contained it. She had forced the system to blink, and now it was blinking carefully, in the suspended state of tolerance. Alya lived each day like a thread stretched over fire. Every step she took now was both progress and peril. Still, requests began arriving, quietly, privately. A Brithic junior officer wanted her opinion on fleet dispersion during asteroid conflicts. A Talvin intelligence analyst asked for insight into predictive bait patterns. None admitted it publicly, but behind closed doors, her thoughts were sought after. She kept a list, not to feel important, but to remember who came seeking clarity in a world of dogma. Each visitor brought new information and risk. Some simply wanted knowledge. Others wanted her to fail. If she miscalculates, one message read, will bury her under her own theories. She read it twice, then archived it, unemotional but alert. One evening, as she analyzed classified skirmish logs in the drift sector, she noticed something strange. Repeated anomalies in reported fleet behavior, patterns that didn't match physics or prior doctrine. She cross-referenced them. The same anomaly appeared across 3 decades. Cover-ups, doctrinal edits, strategic losses reframed as victories. But more alarming, the patterns pointed to manipulation, not just error. Someone had been shaping war data to preserve control. Alya stared at the terminal for hours. If she revealed this, it wouldn't just revise strategy. It would destabilize trust in the entire Sandwalker command legacy. She had found a fracture not in theory, but in history. Her instinct was to share the discovery with General Zarnthal. But when she opened a channel, she found it blocked. Restricted contact. Oversight intervention. That was new. Her access to him had been severed. A warning or a trap? She didn't wait to find out. Instead, she left a sealed message with encoded coordinates and sent it anonymously to the Rada's independent audit board. No names, just data. She didn't expect a reply. But 2 hours later, her room was searched. Quietly, professionally, nothing taken. Everything slightly shifted. It was a message. We know it was you. Her breathing stayed calm. The next morning, a new cadet was assigned to her for mentorship, a silent, stern-eyed Talvin named Saren. His presence was odd. He asked few questions, made no small talk, and followed her every step. Alya tested him with misdirection. He corrected her. She fed him false conclusions. He didn't blink. He wasn't a mentee. He was surveillance. But instead of fear, Alya felt something sharper, clarity. They were no longer trying to intimidate her. They were studying her. And she realized she had passed beyond provocation. Now she was potential, not just for change, but for power. And that frightened them more than her defiance ever had. She decided to test the boundary. In her next closed session review, she proposed a new predictive model for swarm combat using randomized pulse shifts and chaos mapping, a theory never applied in formal doctrine. She watched the room. Some furrowed brows, some scoffed, but others nodded. Quietly, the doctrine began shifting again, not formally, not publicly, but in training sims and whispers. Alya was now a shadow architect. Her words moved without attribution. She was no longer cited. She was emulated. And with every silent adoption, her influence grew wider, but lonelier. She had become essential, and with that came the deepest isolation. One night, she sat alone in the observatory deck, overlooking the nebula fields beyond the Academy dome. For once, the stars didn't feel vast. They felt close, like eyes watching, judging. She whispered to herself, was this ascension or exile? Her reflection in the viewport didn't answer. She thought of home, of her mother's stories about standing up for truth, even when the world pretends it isn't listening. Alya had listened, had spoken, had changed everything. But in doing so, she had become someone unrecognizable, not just to the Academy, but to herself. Was she still that girl who raised her hand? The next morning, Saren, silent as ever, handed her a sealed datapad. It contained a single directive: prepare for integration into Rada Council rotation as Shadow Consultant. Details classified. Reply optional. The message wasn't a request. It was a door. But once crossed, it would lock behind her. There would be no more simulation, no more cadethood, no more peers, just corridors of power, decisions without votes, truths without applause. Alya stared at the message, not out of fear, but to feel its weight. Then, slowly, she replied, acknowledged. The decision wasn't brave. It was inevitable. She had chosen the edge. Now she would live on it. The day Alya stepped into the Rada's shadow chamber, the Academy didn't cheer. It didn't speak. In fact, it barely reacted. There was no announcement, no ceremony, no goodbye. And yet, everyone felt it. Something had shifted. The girl who once raised her hand had crossed an invisible boundary. Now she walked halls that existed beneath the surface, where decisions weren't debated but decided, where silence didn't mean absence. It meant consequence. Alya no longer wore the blue of cadets. Her uniform was black, badgeless, her name absent from the public roster. She had become what the system feared most. Not a rebel, but a reformer within. Her first task as a shadow consultant wasn't tactical. It was political. She was to audit the last decade's doctrines for resilience, a vague term designed to distract. But Alya knew better. It meant find what we're still hiding. As she moved to restricted archives, she uncovered failures rewritten, genocides reframed as evacuations, entire fleets sacrificed under flawed orders, all preserved for morale. She documented everything, not for exposure, but for truth. And in one particularly dense file, she found a name, Zarnthal, listed as architect of a maneuver that killed 40,000 civilians. A secret, a weight. She didn't confront him. Not directly. Instead, she summoned him under Protocol 3A, a right granted to her new role. When he arrived, he said nothing, just stood. She looked him in the eyes and slid the data file forward. Why did you hide this? His voice was lower than ever. Because I wasn't ready for the burden of being wrong. She nodded slowly. The moment didn't end in anger, but in acknowledgement. He placed his hand over the file, then withdrew it. The council will not survive endless truths. Alya replied, then it never deserved to survive illusions. In the weeks that followed, quiet reforms began. Doctrines were revised under technical justifications. Cadets were trained with versions of Alya's models. Even simulations changed, introducing moral failure as a testable variable. No one publicly said it was her doing, but they knew. The silence that had once mocked her now echoed with her logic. One afternoon, a group of recruits filed into Lecture Hall 7, the same place it began. At the center stood a Vriterun instructor. Today, he said, we study the Norwood adjustments. No one laughed. No one rolled eyes. They listened, and through them, she spoke, without needing to be there. But Alya didn't rest. Her position gave her reach, and she used it. She began sending anonymous corrections to outpost commanders. She rewrote briefing templates. She created hidden layers in the war AI code, ethical failsafes to prevent strategic brutality. Quietly, the system bent, not with resistance, but with uneasy acceptance. And yet, she still walked alone. Because change didn't come with applause, it came with doubt, not just from others. From within, She asked herself often, did I betray loyalty or preserve it? She never found a perfect answer, but she kept moving forward, because the question mattered more than comfort. On the anniversary of her tribunal, she returned to the observatory. The stars were unchanged, but she wasn't. She remembered that moment, so long ago, when she raised her hand, not to challenge, not to prove, just to understand. And that small act had fractured centuries. Around her, the galaxy turned. Wars continued. Ambitions evolved. But somewhere, buried in silence, Alya Norwood had changed the direction of thought. One question, one voice. And in that stillness, power had flinched. That was the victory. Not being right, but being heard, when everyone expected her to remain silent. She left the Rada 3 years later. No one knew where she went. Some say she joined a resistance cell. Others claim she advises factions in deep space, using encrypted channels. But one thing remained. Every cadet at Sandwalker still studies her simulations. Her models are acquired learning. And her final doctrine, classified but whispered, is known as the Norwood variable. It teaches not tactics, but mindset, to challenge what seems absolute, to question the unquestionable, to listen when no one speaks. That is her legacy, not in code, but in culture, not in power, but in pause. In the end, it wasn't her victory that reshaped the Rada. It was her silence when she first spoke. Because in that moment, when no one laughed, no one clapped, no one moved, they all felt it. The power of a question too precise to ignore. A truth so sharp, it froze the battlefield. Alya didn't overthrow the system. She outthought it, quietly, permanently. And now, every generation after her carries that same possibility, to raise their hand, to fracture the cycle, to become unforeseen. Because the silence that changed everything wasn't the general's. It was hers. If this story moved you, imagine how many more voices are still waiting to be heard. Subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories like this one. Like if you believe in the power of one voice. Comment your favorite moment from Alya's journey. Become a member to help us keep creating thought-provoking sci-fi tales and to unlock early access, behind-the-scenes content, and exclusive AI-enhanced story breakdowns. More tales from the edge of thought are coming soon. Don't miss the next revelation.